So we're going to talk today about epigenetics, and I'm going to explain to you how you can actually use that genetic data. Okay? We're going to talk about how to optimize your health from a personalized perspective and not just following the masses, not just following generic basic eat more vegetables and go exercise kind of ideas. So we're going to talk about epigenetics today. I'm going to talk about the 3 essentials I like to describe to optimizing your health and longevity using your genetics. Now, I'm a medical doctor, I'm a urologist, I practice clinical urology here in Sarasota, and you might be surprised to see a medical doctor here at a wellness event and wondering what the heck is he doing here, and there's a very specific reason. So, I've been in this disease model world now, 15 years out of training, and training was 6 years of residency, 4 years of medical school. So in reality, 25 years now in the disease model. And what I learned many years ago is that it's failing. It's not working. Okay? It's dying, and our medical system is broken. Because, show of hands, who goes to see a doctor just to be well? Okay, well, I'm in the right room at least. But if I ask most people, no, they only go when there's a problem. And that's what's wrong with society, that's what's wrong with the medical field, that's what's wrong with our health, is that people go to a doctor because they want erection, or because they want to fix this, or because they have an infection, or whatever it may be. We need to change that. We need to change our model, and I call it a performance paradigm. Okay? The model currently is the disease model, going toward neutral, going toward homeostasis, getting rid of disease, fix that problem. Help me get an erection, help me do this, help me do that. And that's it. And what I have learned, and this applies to me personally as well in my own life, in my own health, that we need to go beyond that. And so that's what this is all about. It's about using genetics, using your personal genetic blueprint to optimize your health beyond just neutral. So, leading causes of death in the U.S. These are the top 10 causes. Can everyone see that, by the way? I'm sorry, these new Macs don't have the right connectors. Yeah, I'll walk around and share with you. So, these are the top 10 causes of death in the U.S. If you want to come sit closer, I promise I don't smell it. The Greeks looked at health as the state of a dynamic equilibrium between the internal and external environments. And illness occurs when this balance is upset. Hippocrates talked about this. Hippocratic medicine was patient-centered rather than disease-oriented. We've completely shifted our approach to only taking care of problems, because that's all doctors have time for, and that's all patients really care about, thinking about, focusing on. We need to change that. Time magazine, great article, Why Your DNA Isn't Your Destiny, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But the key point here is that your genes are not the source of most chronic illnesses. Instead of our genes, our lifestyle and environment account for 90 to 95% of most illnesses. We have control. Okay? Great article here shows that cancer is preventable. This study looked at the etiology of cancers. 95% of cancers are lifestyle and environment related. Looking at diet, 30 to 35%. Smoking, infections, obesity, alcohol, others. Only 5% are from your genes. This brings us to my first essential. You have control of your own health. Epigenetics. What the heck is it? What am I talking about? Epigenetics is changes in genetic expression, changes in your body's function that do not involve actual changes in the DNA genetic code. It's the science of how our DNA, our bodies, interact with our lifestyle, with how we eat, how we sleep, how we breathe, how we move, even how we think. We know that genes can be switched on and off. We have that power to turn them on and off and influence our health. We can be strategic about it to achieve whatever outcome we're looking for. And there are studies that show a transgenerational effect, how exposures and lifestyle of your great-grandparents are actually transmitted onto you. And we can see that in your genes. There are actually epigenetic marks, we call it, methylation patterns in your genes that show that experiences from many generations ago are still there present in you. Your DNA, I don't get too scientific here, but your DNA is composed of 46 chromosomes And the chromosomes are made of chromatin, and if you look at a deeper level, it comes down to a strand of DNA. One tiny long strand of DNA, and that is your genetic code. This strand of DNA is a double helix, okay? And that double helix has these little letters, A, T, G, and Z. And those are base pairs, okay? Those base pairs are your code, your genetic code for everything about you. Every part of your body, your function, is embedded in that code. Those are your genes. And that's what we can influence by lifestyle. This is an example. I'm going to get to this later on here with my talk, but this is an example of genes. So these are genes related to estrogen. Estrogen production, estrogen receptor function, how you respond to estrogen. And you'll see two different letters, G, G, C, 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 A. One of those letters is a base pair you got from your mom, and one's a base pair you got from your dad. Put them together, and that's what we call a single nucleotide polymorphism, or SNP. Okay, think of it as a base pair or part of your genes. And so these letters are the code, or the building block of everything about you, your body, your health, your function. So epigenetics involves changing the code, changing the expression of the code. And that can happen through a number of different chemical modifications. But this is all a result of lifestyle, of what you eat, how you sleep, how you breathe, how you move, how you think. A great example is the queen bee. When bees are born, the queen bee, does anyone know about how a bee becomes a queen bee?
She kills everybody else.
Well, kind of. But to get that power, she actually eats royal jelly. Royal jelly is a substance on one of the drone workers. I think it's on their head. The queen eats this royal jelly, and her ovaries change, her body changes, and she becomes a queen bee. And she now has many different powers, if you will, that the other drone bees don't have. Her entire life has been altered. The entire colony has been altered by her eating this royal jelly off the head of a drone. And so that's the classic example of epigenetics, how her entire outcome is different simply because of what she ate. The agouti mice, there's a gene in mice that code for obesity and cancer and diabetes. And that makes them look like this. Well, they found that a pregnant mouse with the agouti gene, if they fed that mouse extra vitamin B and folate, suddenly her offspring looked like this. They looked normal. Simply by what she ate. Same exact genes. There's been no change in her genetic code. But this is what we're talking about, how identical from a genetic perspective, but different simply from an epigenetic modification standpoint. Spina bifida. This used to be a very common problem in kids and newborns. They found that pregnant women, if they gave them folate in their multivitamin, the occurrence of that now is almost negligible. We've completely almost eradicated spina bifida simply by giving pregnant women more folate in their multivitamins while they're pregnant. So your genes plus your environment, your lifestyle equals you. Environmental inputs have an effect on you to create a metabolic response. And that is epigenetics. Okay. So we look at 6 aspects of your health and how we can strategically use this information to optimize you by knowing this information. So, for example, these are great examples of nutrition. There's an ApoE lipoprotein gene. This is a gene that has to do with how lipids are carried in your bloodstream. So, again, we have genes here, sample genetic report here. Look at the ApoE genes and certain genetic patterns called an ApoE4 variant. If you happen to have just the right mix of letters there from your parents, you are at an increased risk of Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease and diabetes and early mortality simply from increased saturated fat intake. Saturated fat is in red meat, it's in dairy, cheese, milk, butter. So, well, that's different. That's different. We're talking about simply nutrition, what you eat and how your body processes it. So we know that carriers of the ApoE4 status are at higher risk of those diseases simply by what they're eating. And we know that for those people, limiting saturated fats is going to have a tremendous effect on their health, on their outcome. So, keto diet is great for some people, but not for an ApoE4 carrier. Okay, that's how we specifically use your genetic information to create a plan to optimize your health. Without knowing this information, you're just guessing. You're guessing. Maybe keto is right for me, for example. It may be perfect for you, it may not be. Okay? Fish oil. These are inflammatory proteins, and these are energy, lipid metabolism genes, if you will. And fish oil has been shown in studies to increase the genetic expression of these and decrease the epigenetic expression of those. Simply by eating fish oil. So forget all these population-based studies of Alaska or this country or that country and what these long-term longitudinal studies show about outcomes and survival. We know from a scientific perspective, looking under the microscope and looking at actual genes, that fish oil has a tremendous epigenetic effect on metabolism, on inflammation, on energy. Okay? That's the power of epigenetics. Intermittent fasting, we know that tons of benefits relating to longevity. So it's not just what you eat, but it's when you eat. Anyone done intermittent fasting before here? A lot of people, awesome, good. So, intermittent fasting has been shown to reduce cardiovascular disease, inflammation, it helps with autophagy, with getting rid of dead, old cells, helps with weight loss and hormone balance, and improves insulin sensitivity. But this is all from an epigenetic standpoint. Okay, it's all from effective gene expression. Yes, ma'am.
Define intermittent fasting.
Yes, ma'am. Great question. So intermittent fasting is where you have defined periods of intake, of food intake. So for example, what I do, for example, is I do a 16-hour fast, and I'll eat within an 8-hour window. It's called a 16-8 pattern. Some people will fast for 24 hours at a time. To me, that's torture. Other people can do it. Some people will do a 24-hour fast for 2 days a week. Some people will do a 3-day, 72-hour fast, like once a month. For me, that's a lot, but intermittent fasting is simply caloric restriction in defined windows, okay? And it's been shown to have substantial benefit.
How many times a week for the 16 hours?
I personally do it Monday through Friday, but you can do it whatever you can do. You know, I tell starters to start out with just 1 day a week and try it, and then go to 2 days, and then go on. I love breakfast, so my weekends are my time to eat breakfast. But everyone's different. Okay. Exercise. Exercise has been shown. Everyone says you need to exercise more. We know that. That's basic standard stuff. But it's been shown to increase expression of nearly 7,000 genes in your body. That's almost a third of your genes are upregulated with aerobic exercise. Okay? So it goes beyond just saying you need to exercise to lose weight. It's that you're actually affecting the genetic expression of your body and ultimately going to affect your longevity. Sleep. Sleep has been, or lack thereof, has been associated with cardiovascular disease, clear association with Alzheimer's disease, a clear, strong evidence of the correlation between sleep deprivation and the incidence of Alzheimer's disease. It's been associated with weight gain or loss if you have good sleep habits, associated with hormone imbalance and increased risk of several cancers, especially endocrine-related cancers, and early mortality. A lot of studies, especially in animals, showing increased longevity in animals who are sleeping longer than those that are sleep deprived. Yeah.
What would you say folks should sleep? Is it 8 hours?
Yeah, so everyone's different. Your genetics help us understand what sleep duration actually is best for you. For most people, I would say at least 7. Some people do okay with just 7 hours, 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep. Some people need as much as 8 to 8.5. But your genetics actually can help you understand what sleep duration is best for you. One good night of sleep we know activates over 500 genes. The WHO has classified shift working, which means like night shift working, as a carcinogen. Not me, I'm impressed everyone here knows this stuff. That's pretty powerful. For them to make that classification, that has to be pretty strong evidence. So increased risk of cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes, and cognitive decline with sleep deprivation. Daylight savings, I love that fun stuff. The daylight savings, there have been several studies that show increased health risks that one day, and it takes 4 days before that risk goes down. So increased risk of cardiovascular events, suicides, and one fun study showed that judges give out harsher sentences on that one day after when they've lost an hour of sleep. Pretty fun stuff. Back to that ApoE4 gene we talked about before, we also know that in those carriers with that particular gene, again, those who have poor sleep have an even more increased risk of cognitive Alzheimer's. Okay. A great study out of Edina, Minnesota, the high school there, they changed the start time from 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning.
So smart.
And they found a dramatic change in the SAT scores. 56 in math and over 150 in verbal of the scores of their kids just by changing the start time. Critical impact of sleep. So in my practice, I see a lot of men who see me regularly for testosterone and weight loss and energy. And one of the most common things I find is poor sleep. And you can't be doing keto, you can't be doing running marathons, you can't be doing this and that if you're not addressing your sleep as well. Stress is another big one. We're capable of making ourselves ill with only our thoughts and emotions. Mark Twain said, I've suffered a great many catastrophes in my life, most of which never happened. So I talked to lawyers for about an hour about this topic alone. So stress is a huge topic, huge area of health. And I listened to a podcast on Robert Sapolsky. He wrote the book Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, because they don't stress about what's going to happen. So stress has been associated with a number of bad things, obviously. For the sake of time, we'll move on. Cortisol. So there are genes related to cortisol. Cortisol production. Cortisol receptor function. How your body responds to cortisol. And again, we look at specific genes here that are related to cortisol. And we want to optimize those the best we can. And sometimes it requires lifestyle change. Sometimes it's micronutrients. Sometimes it's related to sleep and nutrition. And so they're all intertwined. Meditation. There's a medical doctor here talking about meditation. Can you believe it? But there's actually science behind it. There's several great studies. This one showed over 2,000 genes were upregulated in long-term meditators, and over 1,500 genes in those who just started out newbies. Okay, so it has actual scientific, defined benefit. Endocrine disruptors, I give whole talks on just this alone. There are chemicals, toxins in our environment killing. Who knows about endocrine disruptors? Most, maybe half, okay. So endocrine disruptors are chemicals, toxins, exposures in our environment that will crush our endocrine system. They work by either turning off hormones like testosterone or estrogen. They work just like testosterone or estrogen, or they block those hormones from working properly. They are everywhere. They're ubiquitous. They're in herbicides and pesticides on the crops that we eat. They're on cosmetics. They're in your deodorant, your cologne, your perfume, especially perfume, sunscreen, laundry detergent is a big one. All these household products, tons of endocrine disruptors. Water bottles have BPA, we know. Paper receipts have BPA. Phytoestrogens. Who likes soy here? Okay, good. I could trash soy. I'm kidding. Soy has been shown to have a tremendous epigenetic effect on hormone production. Okay, and so we call it is classified as an endocrine disruptor for that reason. Plastic products, so cooking your food in plastic containers or storing foods in containers. I think it's funny. It's not funny, it's sad. We drink milk. The milk is in plastic, paper cartons that are lined with plastic. The cows are given hormones. The cows eat crops that are covered in pesticides and herbicides. And so that milk, think of all the different layers and layers of endocrine disruptors that have been incorporated into that milk. And then birth control. Tons of studies have shown that there's birth control in our water supply. Yes, sir.
You mentioned about the soy. I'm curious how that manifests in populations that consume a lot of soy. For example, in Japan, they eat tremendous amounts of soy.
Yep.
So how does that manifest?
Great question. So I can send you a couple. If you want to reach out to me afterwards, I'll send you a couple great articles on that. In general, endocrine disruptors, in general, hormone imbalance, obesity, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, diabetes, increased risk of cancers, autoimmune issues, it goes on and on and on. And my focus is mostly on hormone issues, especially testosterone in men, where this has a tremendous effect, but it goes on and on to almost every aspect of your health. And so when I work with clients one-on-one, one of the big things we focus on is eliminating or minimizing exposure to those endocrine disruptors. Essential number 2, I promise the next 2 are quicker than the first one. Your body is a symphony. So what I mean by this is, I mentioned before, you can't just focus on one thing. You can't just focus on what you're eating. You can't just focus on endocrine disruptors. It's everything combined. It's your hormones, it's your nutrition, it's your stress, it's your sleep, it's your thyroid, it's your metabolism, it's your micronutrients, it's your mindset. I'm in the right group to talk about mindset. I gave a whole talk on that. Environmental exposures, social connections. Several great studies have shown that longevity is associated with positive social connection and philanthropic efforts and interacting with your community. So it's so much more than any one individual piece. And I say your body's a symphony because if you take out one instrument, it doesn't sound right, it doesn't work right. It all works together. Okay? Think of it like a puzzle, think of it like a symphony. You have to focus on every part of that. Guys come see me for testosterone and testosterone shots, or they go to the testosterone clinic down the street, and it's a joke. Because it's so much more than just that. They're just getting that piece of the puzzle and ignoring everything else for financial gain at that center. So you have to look at everything. Cholesterol profile here, a lipid profile, looking at HDL, LDL, triglycerides, total cholesterol. The sick care model says that that's just a factor of your diet and your family history. That's about it. And then if you have a statin deficiency, we'll give you a statin. Okay. In reality, it's from all these different things. Stress affects inflammation, which affects your lipids, your genetics, your nutrition, your micronutrients, supplements, activity, and then your finances and your environmental exposures. They all interact, your activity. So everything interacts. Okay? And that's what we mean by whole body systems-based approach. That you look at the whole system. You can't look at any one individual piece. I love this picture. It's 6 blind men looking at an elephant. Okay? And each of them see a different part. He sees rope, he sees a wall, he sees a tree, he sees an arrow, depending on what part of the elephant they're looking at. The correlation, the point here, is that you can't look at any one individual thing without seeing everything else. You're missing the big picture. Essential number 3, the future of medicine and health is personal. It's a personalized approach is where we're going. Don't be that. Don't be a sheep. Okay? Don't follow the masses. Don't guess. Know based on your genetic blueprint. So we've already talked about genetic reports. How about half of you in here have done it? And now we're going to talk about what do you actually do with that data? Because the information, the report you might get from these companies that are out there are kind of worthless without applying them to your individual self. So SNPs I mentioned before, just to explain this, because this is kind of critical. You have your DNA, your gene with the DNA double helix, and you have these letters as I mentioned, and we will all have variations in a letter here, a letter there. Okay? You may have an A here, you may have a G here, and you may have a T here. And those slight differences are everything. Our genes, all humans' genes, are about 99% identical. That 1% variation is what SNPs are. Okay, single nucleotide polymorphisms. That defines how we are all different, how we look different, how we think different, how our bodies function different. And so SNPs help us understand you and how we can leverage that information to optimize you. So we can look at nutrition, and on this small screen you can't see these, but this is a page looking at just your carbohydrate intake. And these are all your genes related to carbohydrate intake. And at the bottom of the report it says typical optimal intake. But without looking at those individual genes and understanding you and how you might react to carbs, for example, that doesn't tell us a whole lot. But it's applying that genetic information to you, and that's how we can use this information to help you and guide your choices every day. total fats, we talked about the ApoE4 gene, there's a PPAR gamma gene, there's a FTO, which is the fat gene, that's the gene that tells you if you're likely to be obese with a carb intake, and we can use this information to modify your nutrition. We can use your genes to understand if you're not sleeping well. How long should you be sleeping? Are you at risk for sleep disruption? Okay. Your circadian rhythm. And all these pages, all these reports, again, you can't just take what the report tells you. You have to look at each of the genes and understand what they mean to you. Okay. Genes, we're looking at hormones. So we have genetics related to thyroid, cortisol, estrogen, and testosterone, for example, on this page. And so we can use this information to understand how we can best optimize your hormones. Okay. Not just guessing, but knowing. So direct-to-consumer generic reports don't work because interpretation and personal application is critical. It's very complex, and this page is meant to look complex because it is. Okay, you couldn't possibly understand it. You know, the genome-wide association study was released completed about 10 years ago, and they tried to conclude that one gene equals one trait. Okay. Here's the gene that tells you if you're going to be obese. Here's the gene that tells you if you're going to have cancer. Well, it's not true. It's not true at all. Because it looks like this. There's so many steps in the path to have an outcome that can be altered along the way. And there's so many genes that interact with each other. So, precision medicine, precision health, it requires interaction, it requires personalization, it requires understanding epigenetics and how you can apply that personalized information to optimize your health. So the last part of this is tech. I love this part. People come in and tell me, I sleep fine. The guy will say, yeah, I sleep great. Well, how do you know? I said, well, I go to bed at this time, I wake up at this time, but how do you know you slept well? Well, I don't know. Without tracking it, without somehow monitoring it, you have no idea. You're just guessing. And so I'm big on wearable technology. So I'm wearing a Garmin Fenix 5 Watch, for example, and I track my stress, my sleep. So this is an example from just today. It shows you my sleep. I didn't sleep as much as I should have yesterday. Shows you my stress level. We look at steps and you look at calories and you look at that kind of stuff as well. But you look at your resting heart rate, your heart rate variability, and other key biomarkers to know if what you're doing is right. And you can track it, you can monitor it, and you can use this information from wearable technology to change your life. Great example with stress. I followed this for months, and I found there were times where it would spike, and I couldn't really figure out why. And then it finally hit me that my wife and I, we get date night twice a week. We have a nanny date night twice a week, and I go out and have a glass of red wine. And every time the next day, my stress level went up. It took me a while to realize that correlation. So for me, wine increases my HRV, increases my stress levels, increases my resting heart rate. And so I can make a personal decision based on knowing that information. We can use genetics for predicting cancer risk as well. There are a couple great tests out there. There's MyRisk and Color that look at your risk of developing certain cancers. So there are 8 cancers in general. We look at about 40 to 45 SNPs that show increased risk of those cancers. BRCA1's the one that people typically think of. And using this information is critical because now we can assess your risk and know, hey, you're at higher risk of prostate cancer. I'm going to manage you very differently than another guy that's not at necessarily genetic risk. I do a lot of active surveillance for men with prostate cancer without treating them. And a guy with a BRCA1 gene, studies have shown he's at much higher risk of that cancer being more aggressive. And so we're going to manage him very differently. And so it's using this genetics to guide a precision-based approach to health. We can look at epigenetic age as well. So there are tests where we can look at your longevity and your lifespan based on your current epigenetic state. And then we can make changes in your life, and we can check it again 6 months later and see if we're making a difference, if we're on the right track. So precision medicine is personalized, is predictive, is proactive, and most importantly is participatory. It takes interested people. It takes people who want to be proactive about their health. someone asked me, well, you give me all these tools and all these things to do and this and that, but what if I don't want to do it? Okay, you answered the question. So again, the new paradigm, are you moving away from disease or toward health? Okay, and this is the future of medicine. So what I do, people always ask me, well, what do I do? What's the next step? What's the first step? It starts with a cheek swab. I use a company called Epigenetics, and Epigenetics is going to be opening a Center for Human Potential here in Sarasota soon. I'm the medical director, so it's very exciting. Yeah, very cool. They make their own kit, and this is very important because I talked earlier outside about privacy. Okay, thank you. Not attached. So this is a kit. It has a cheek swab, has a little bottle that you put it in after you do the cheek swab, and you send it in. And about 2 weeks later, you get your data. 760,000 SNPs as one .txt file. Okay, there's a bunch of RSID numbers with a bunch of letters that you don't know what to do with. But I could use that information to create a personalized report and then actually apply it with you. So I offer a personalized consultation where I go through that report, I interpret it, and apply it to you individually. What's unique, what's important about Epigenetics is the data is yours. Okay, so 23andMe, Ancestry DNA, there's a huge concern about privacy, and I won't use them at all. And so Epigenetics, they don't keep your data. The data is destroyed. Once you get that email, it's gone. And so there's a barcode here that I tell my clients to be sure you take a picture of it and write it down, because if you lose that barcode, the data is gone. There's no way to retrieve it. We don't know whose it is. And so there's the privacy part of it is really important with this. So that's why I use Epigenetics. And that's how it works. And so once you get your genetic data, we meet, we go over the information, and we create a blueprint on how to move forward from there. Knowledge bites to summarize here. You have control over your health. Epigenetics. Your body's a symphony. You have to look at every part, systems-based approach. And you need a personalized approach to optimize your health. Okay? Don't be a sheep. Okay? Don't follow the masses. Don't guess. That's it. Thank you so much. I have a gift. I have a gift for you. Appreciate that. If you want to get, I have it's called an Edge Blueprint ebook. It's free. If you want to just text Limitless to 31996, I will email you the ebook. It goes in more detail about the information I've shared with you today. And I will also share with you a 25% discount on that consultation I mentioned with the genetic report. Thank you so much.